nice day. As you can see, I have a new trigger for you this week. Cheers. Relax. Again, I hope everybody had a good week. Let's see what we're going to be talking about. Today is Monday, March 10th, but you can watch these videos at any time. I believe the title of today's episode is going to be called How Numbers Do Not Lie, but People Do, and often to themselves as well as others. Tomorrow when you come back, I will have an ASMR ramble where I'm going to talk about where does money live if you do not spend it. So where does money live if you do not spend it? And that is a good problem to have for all of you as you move forward building your wealth. So yeah, it's going to be a ramble anchoring back to my thought process in March right now of 2025, where I'm considering moving some money around with either Vanguard or Fidelity or perhaps both. So come back tomorrow. Tomorrow's episode, by the way, was recorded in late February on a very cold morning when I decided to turn on the camera. So I hope you enjoy it. Wednesday. How the surge of Hurricane Helene continues to this day. I'm going to give you an update on everything that's going around, or everything that's happening, I should say, related to the surge of the units here at my condo community that flooded. There were 31 units that flooded, as you guys very well know that have been with me since the beginning. Hurricane Helene devastated my area September 26th of last year, almost 6 months ago, and it is still not solidified as far as the payout that those people that flooded are going to receive, but I'll give you an update. So yeah, the surge of the hurricane continues to this very day. On Thursday, it's going to be ASMR at the movies. I've decided to create a 10 or 11 minute video that I'm calling an ASMR movie to entertain you. And It's going to be most likely titled Evan's Imagination Runs Wild while reading about the upcoming hurricane season by Poolside. That's a long title. I don't know. I might shorten it up a little bit. But it's basically me by the poolside here at my condo community, thinking through the upcoming hurricane season. And so there will be some triggers like a pool pump, traffic sounds, crowd sounds, boat rowing, airplane sounds, etc. So I hope you enjoy it. It's a very edited video, again, that I'm calling a mini movie, which I think actually is the wave of the future of ASMR. Not only creating storylines with ASMR, but I also think that informative ASMR, like my channel, is also going to be the wave of the future, where people are going to teach through ASMR. When you come back on Friday, we're going to talk through. I had an appointment with Fidelity, by the way. It was a very good appointment. And so, again, I'm in that transitional period where I'm trying to figure out where's my money going to live. And so, I want to tell you about my discussion with this person at Fidelity and some advice that he gave me as far as not having assets under management, but some choices I have with where I can put the money if I keep it with Fidelity. Remember, it's the 401k, that $850,000 that I'm thinking of rolling over into two different IRAs, individual retirement accounts. One would be a Roth and one would be a traditional IRA. Remember, you can have multiple IRAs at different companies like Fidelity and Vanguard. I've got one at Vanguard. Originally I thought you could only have one, but no, you can have multiple. You just can't contribute more than the maximum total dollar amount, but I'm not contributing to my IRAs at this point anyway, since I retired on January 10th of this year. So yeah, come back on Friday. I'm going to give you my thoughts on some asset funds that he recommended, and yet I think I'm leaning towards a little bit of a cheaper target fund that has a lower expense ratio. So yeah, come back and I will share that with you. So moving on to the content of today's episode. Again, how numbers don't lie, but people do. And when I say people, I don't mean just all of you. I mean myself included. There was a time in my life when I was in complete denial with how much debt I had and how I was not doing really well with money. It was a complete and utter denial. I did not want to know how much debt I had. So when I talk through what I'm about to share with you today, I want you to understand that I was also included in this scenario, but it's multiple years later and people change. And if you guys are not doing well with money right now, you can change as well, as long as you just put in the time to learn and then to make decisions based on optimizing your money, or money maxing, as I like to call it as well. I think I'm going to put that in the thumbnail. Maxing your money. So in social media, there's a term which you've probably seen. It's called looks maxing, where people get advice from other people about how they look. Like, what's your hairstyle? What does your physique look like? How can you increase your attractiveness, right? Well, you can also be attractive from a monetary perspective as well with money. So I'm calling this money maxing, which I would like to discuss that I think for most people, the average investor like myself, it was more important for me over the years to optimize the money that I had than either chase market returns or try to make more money. And let me explain what I mean. It seems like there's a lot of people out there that are always trying to increase their money to numbers that could be unrealistic. Like, for example, somebody might say, I want to make $1 million a year. How realistic really is that? Or would you rather say to yourself, you know what, over the course of my lifetime, I'm going to build an engine. I'm going to build $1 million net worth, or a $2 million net worth, or a $3 million net worth is more likely to happen than somebody that may try to earn and make $1 million in a year and spend it all. And even if they save it, that's good too, but very, very, very few people. Remember to anchor back to my episodes from last week where I talk through social media and people that you might be looking at. Very few people can really do that well. So I've always erred on the side of realism, and I became more realistic the older I got. Because you don't want to look back over your life of 5 or 10 years and say, wow, I really should have pivoted and changed and started to do better with the money that I did have coming in rather than trying to chase more money. So, again, money maxing means for each of you out there watching me right now, all of you in this year of 2025 will have a certain salary or a certain amount of money that you will have, and that number at the end of the year is not going to change. So it could be 50,000, it could be 80,000, it could be 100,000, it might be 40,000. But that amount of money that you have, again, is not going to change. And so you want to learn to maximize the money that you do have. So remember last week, I think it was actually last Wednesday, where I talked through savings rates. Remember, your saving rate is how much money you're saving and investing every year. And I gave the example for myself. Remember, it was $94,000. 2 years ago, I had $94,000 after tax as a net for the year that I could then spend on anything I want. And because I positioned myself over many years, remember, it was 8% for fun and other, 20% for expenses, and 72% as a savings rate. But it took me years to get there. Now, before I move forward, I also want to say that in my playlist, I do have an episode about building a budget for those of you that are watching right now. You have to start somewhere, so if you have not started yet with personal finance, watch that episode to learn how to build a budget. And the way I'd explained it last Wednesday was really not the way you should do it. I was giving the outcome of it. But really, you start with your Excel spreadsheet and you say, what are my expenses? What do I have to pay for? Based on whatever your begin number is. Remember, you either are thriving or just surviving. You're surviving if you just pay your expenses. That's great. If you have extra money, then you're thriving. So, to begin the analysis, you have to do the spreadsheet first, and really you start with your expenses. Mine were $19,000, which again was 20%. Then I knew, I was like, wow, Evan, you've got so much more money left over. Then I decided, how much money would I be comfortable paying myself for fun and other, because really, it's a choice. All of you have to understand that, again, it is a choice to pay yourself for fun and other. You can either be really frugal and try to filter that money into the next category that I'm going to talk about, or you can spend like there's no tomorrow and you have no accountability and no idea really of how much you're spending. Does that make sense? So again, begin with your expenses, then decide how much do you want to spend on fun and other. And make sure you stick to that, because then the next bucket, remember, was saving and investing, the open to buy. And for me, that was 72% or $68,000. Because if you take 68 plus 19,000 plus 7,500, you get to roughly the 94,000 begin amount that I had. So, money maxing, for me then, I'm going to give you in this episode several tips that can help you as you start to maybe transition into maximizing your money and optimizing it as well, to make sure that you filter most of it into the savings and investing. Because if you want to build wealth, as I've already talked about, then your savings rate, for those of you especially that are getting older, is the number one thing, in my opinion, that's going to get you to where you want to be. Yes, market returns are going to be on your side, or maybe they're not. You're going to have maybe 5 or 10 years of bad market returns. You might have another 5 or 10 of good market returns. We don't know what's going to happen with the market. So don't concentrate and expect the market to save you. We don't know, again, what the market's going to do. So why not control what you can control, which again is keeping your fun and other down, and your saving and investing up, and also keeping your expenses down as well. And before I continue and talk about the several tips here to maximize your money, I also want to share with you in this episode that most money coaches would probably suggest that for those of you that are beginning your financial independent journey, that you start with what's called the 50-30-20 rule. So let me break that down. And this is, again, going to anchor back to my last Wednesday's episode where I talked through my savings rate. So, by the way, how did you do last Wednesday when you then looked at your own numbers? What was your total dollar amount of after-tax income? Was it $94,000 like for me? Was it $50,000? Was it 40? Was it 60? You need to know that number, right? Then you need to know, okay, I need to build my budget. What are my expenses? And then you can filter down into the other two buckets of fun and investing and saving. But the 50-30-20 rule says, especially for people that are just beginning, and again, this is more conventional wisdom of traditional money coaching, would be that try to keep your expenses at 50% or below. So let's do an example. If you had $80,000 of after-tax income, remember mine a couple years ago was $94,000, but if yours is $80,000, what is 50% of $80,000? $40,000. So hopefully your expenses are $40,000 or below for things like your mortgage, either your rent or electric, your association fees if you have them, food, gas, internet, all of those things, right? Car insurance, car payments, gas, all of your critical expenses, keeping that 50% or below, which again, $40,000 or below. So pat yourself on the back if after last Wednesday you did your analysis, and if you were 50% or below, then congratulations. Now remember, for me, what was that percent for my expenses? It was 20%. So my expenses a couple years ago were 20%. Now remember, again, and I can't reiterate this enough, that was a very deliberate attempt on my side that took a decade to accomplish. Okay? So if you are 50% or below, then consider yourself very, very good as far as your expenses. So continuing on then, in the example, if you're making $80,000 of after-tax income, you would want your your fun and other bucket to be 30% or below. So what is 30% of 80,000? It's 24,000. So 24,000 then would be for fun and other, which I think that's a really big number, actually, So I tend to just err on the side of frugality. In fact, right now for 2025, just to segue into this little thought here for just a moment, you guys know I went on a vacation in February, early February, and I spent a couple $1,000s. And so for me, that's a lot of money in terms of what I was used to spending. So when I now look at my fun budget and other budget for the rest of 2025, I've really depleted a lot of it because I spent so much of it in February, and we have another 10 or 11 months to go, right? Now, I do have a contingency budget, by the way, but it then forces me to remain frugal and to maybe not go out to eat as much, because that really makes me happy. To be super frugal and to say to myself, Evan, you spent the $2,000 now. As a net result over time, how can you make that up? Well, I can spend a lot less. And again, that makes me happy. As we go throughout the year, then I may have to pivot because I want to go to Ohio in July. My sister's going to be there, so I am planning a trip. So I might have to pull my contingency budget, but anyway, try to keep, again, your fun and other as low as possible, and then navigate throughout the year, cross-check and reverse engineer so that you can meet that goal. And then continuing on with our example, if you've got $80,000 of after-tax income, what is your saving and investing goal? 20%. And this one, you would want it to be 20% or above. The other ones, right, were below. This one you want to be as high as possible. So if your other numbers for expenses goes down, or your fun and other goes down, it has to go somewhere. Where is it going to go? It's going to go into your saving and your investing. So in this example, that would be $16,000. So if all you can contribute to your 401k, or maybe you've got a Roth IRA, all depends on where you are in your journey. You might still be working on your emergency fund first in 2025, and that's fine. But that is what you would want to hope for with conventional wisdom, again, as a money coach for people that are just starting out with their, personal financial independent journey. So if we add up those numbers, $16,000 for saving, $24,000 for fun and other, $40,000 for expenses equals the $80,000 of after-tax income, which then gives credence to the rule of 50, 30, 20. But what was mine a couple years ago, and where can yours get to eventually as well? Mine was 20, 8, 72. 20 expenses, 8 for fun and other, and 72% for saving and investing. So, to wrap up this episode, I hope that makes sense. Oh, I forgot to include the tips for money maxing. Let me discuss those before we end our episode today. So again, if you're just beginning, some tips to maximize your money would be to track your spending and your expenses, obviously. So again, go to my playlist. There's an episode on how to build a budget for those of you just starting out that don't know how to build a budget. Go take a look at it. It's simple to do. You've got to track your spending and your expenses. And if you meet your spending for fun and other and your expenses, then you can attain your goal of whatever percent you've allocated for saving and investing. Number 2, use budgeting apps and or spreadsheets. So again, I don't like apps actually. I'm a little bit old school. So it depends. I know many of you probably use a lot of apps and things that help you track spending, and if so, that's awesome. Continue to do that. But I like to see it on an Excel spreadsheet. I like to deduct the numbers from the buckets. Remember, I build my budget. I spend my money in advance. One of my most popular videos on my channel is where I talk about spending your money in advance. I'll probably reiterate that information in an upcoming video because it was such a popular topic. You need to spend your money in advance of the year even coming. You need to be forward thinking, critical thinking about the entire year. Spend your money on paper first. Create the Excel buckets and deduct from those buckets as you go. You can never go wrong, because if you're giving yourself the $94,000 that I talked about earlier, or you're giving yourself the, whatever that number was, the $19,000 for expenses, you're deducting those expenses from the buckets, right? If you have to borrow from another bucket, that's fine. It all nets to zero. Then you're going to maximize your money and you're going to get to the 72% of saving and investing. So, number 2, again, use budgeting apps or spreadsheets. And finally, number 3 is set savings goals. You can have short-term goals, mid-term goals, or long-term goals. Short-term goals, 1 to 3 years, things like your emergency fund, home repairs, things that are earmarked that you need within 1 to 3 years. Because again, some of you might just be building up your emergency fund. That's great. Your mid-term goals are from like 4 to 8 years or 9 years, somewhere in there. And midterm goals are things like if you're planning a wedding or if you're going to have children, etc. So you've got these expenses set aside for in the next 4 to 10 years. And then 10 plus years, long-term planning for things like retirement, maybe for your children's college, or maybe for legacy planning or estate planning. Legacy meaning what you may be leaving to your heirs as you get older and older. So again, track your spending, use budgeting apps or spreadsheets, and number 3, make sure that you set your savings goals. Even in retirement, like where I am right now, I still budget my money. I still use my spreadsheets. I look at them every day almost, and I deduct from those buckets, and I'm always looking at optimizing the money or maximizing the money that I have within the year. So with that, everybody, I'm going to go ahead and close out this episode. Numbers, again, do not lie. These percentages that I'm sharing with you, the dollar amounts, they do not lie. Once we get to the end of 2025 and you look back at 12 months, the numbers are what the numbers are. So don't lie to yourself. Don't lie and say, oh, I'm doing okay, I'm fine. You really need to be very deliberate with your numbers, because numbers don't lie, but unfortunately, people sometimes do, and especially to themselves. So with that, everybody, I'm going to go and close out this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If so, give me a thumbs up. Consider subscribing to my channel as well. And I will see you guys